I'm Chris Farrell, and this is On Watch. Welcome to On Watch, everybody, the Judicial Watch podcast, where we go behind the headlines to cover news and information that the legacy mainstream media really doesn't want you to know about. We try to recover some lost history. We try to explain the inexplicable. And today, as a guest, we're very privileged to have Congressman Andy Biggs of the 5th District of Arizona joining us on Watch. Welcome, Congressman Biggs.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be with you and your audience.
Great to be with you. You are a good friend to Judicial Watch, and our supporters around the country know what a brave stand-up guy you are, fighting for individual liberty and freedoms and all the good stuff that Judicial Watch stands for. So thanks for taking the time to talk to us. Sir, you serve on both the House Oversight Committee and also on the Judiciary Committee, if my research turns out to be correct. And I just wanted to touch on a report that just came out of the Judiciary Committee, I guess just about a week ago, on banking secrecy. And I want to just kind of kick the door open and let you charge in and help educate our audience about what's going on in the world of banking secrecy.
Well, so people need to understand that the Banking Secrecy Act was meant to actually provide a shield of privacy protection for people who bank. But it has now become a sword for the weaponized federal police agencies to go after and inspect your records and your financial data. So here's the way to think of it. They have, when I say they, I'm talking about primarily the FBI, but other federal police agencies as well. Millions upon millions of individuals' data records have been surveilled by our federal police agencies, and here's how they do it. Do you want me to go into that? How they do that?
Yeah, I want you to explain it. Lay it out.
Okay, so here's the way it works. So you have something called a SAR, or a suspicious activity report, and that's designed so if the bank sees something that's irregular or unusual, they can actually take that and file that with the federal government.
People should think about Hunter Biden.
Exactly.
When they think about hundreds of suspicious activity reports, Hunter Biden falls in that category.
Yeah, we could talk about that. Those reports, suspicious activity reports, were coming because you would see a wad of money. I won't say what, because I'm probably not allowed to say what. It would come into one account, and it would be there for 10 hours, and then be moved over to another account, and then and you start seeing that type of thing. That's suspicious, right? And then it looks like money laundering. So that's what you have. That's a suspicious activity report. Well, along about the time of January 6th, right, the federal police agency said, we can't see that financial data unless we have a warrant. In other words, we have to have probable cause, go into a court, and exercise due process to get the opportunity to see into somebody's financial records.
Right.
And so we suspect him of a crime related to finances, et cetera. Well, what they found out is, because the suspicious activity report under the Banking Security Act does, is it says basically you could file that SAR if the bank has a suspicion, legitimate suspicion about somebody. Well, so what the FBI did and other federal police agencies is they would, let's say, Chris, you're the bank. They would send you a notation saying, hey, Chris, we've got all these suspicions about this Andy Biggs character, we're not sure what he's doing, we're really concerned about him. And so Chris is the bank, let's say, I don't know, Bank of America or any one of the other 6 banks would say, federal FBI has a suspicion of Andy Biggs. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to issue a suspicious activities report to the federal government, and it's going to come to the FBI. And guess what they're going to do? They say, hey, now we've got probable cause to go in and look at the financial records of Andy Biggs. So it was this tautological, almost this circle of
It's a self-licking ice cream cone. Yeah.
Exactly right. And so that's how they did it. Now we're laughing about it because it's so absurd that that would happen.
Correct.
And when really we're all really angry about it. But when you consider the audacity of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and other federal police agencies to do this, you say, it's outrageous. It is something you would see in an old Peter, Sellers movie about Inspector Clouseau or something. They've come up with this way to justify everything. This is the tail wagging the dog.
Right. And this is the reason why the American public has lost faith in the FBI in particular, but other law enforcement agencies, because they say, look, this whole situation, the whole deal is rigged, right? It's all lined up against me. I can't tell you the number of people who contacted Judicial Watch saying, hey, look, I was in Washington on January 6th. I didn't go near the Capitol. I watched Trump's speech, and one couple in particular, the person had a medical issue. They needed to go rest, and so they went back to their hotel, and they took it easy for the rest of the day. They weren't involved in anything, anywhere within blocks of the Capitol. And sure enough, what did they get? They got their house raided. They got the third degree.
Yeah.
Just for being in Washington. And you know what it was? It was a card swipe. They went to an ATM and got some cash because they were going to do some souvenir shopping and go around the city and see the sights. But these banks ran to the FBI and without a warrant were giving up data of all of their customers who did any kind of a transaction in the Metro D.C. area, saying, well, obviously, if they're in Washington, they must be a criminal.
Well, many people are criminals in Washington, D.C.
That's true. That's also true. Visitors, any visitor on January 6th. So there's a lot of situation like that. And, you go back in time, you go back to, Elizabeth Warren and her, Frankenstein monster she created, the CFPB, Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. They loved big data. They loved, and I think it's probably still going on. CFPB was getting the card swipe data of every credit card transaction in the country, 92 fields of information on every time somebody used a card. And they said, we're not looking at the name. We don't really want to know who it is. We're just looking for trends. We're looking for who's spending money and how much and what their credit line is, because they love big data. Those were warrantless searches, and it goes all the way back to the Obama administration for those warrantless searches. And now what you're talking about takes it up even a higher notch. It's even crazier with the level of abuse they're doing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've moved from they were looking at broadly anybody who had a computer search for MAGA or any America First, what we would call just generic political. You're not even necessarily a political activist. You're just looking at, hey, I wonder what's the MAGA thing about, and then it became this mechanism to actually take something that was designed to protect consumers and use it to go after them. After you've triggered the dynamite, you've lit the fuse, and now it's going to blow up. But see, the other thing that ticks me off about all this is you had these banks, and several of them were volunteering this information.
Right.
When reality is there was no basis for a suspicious activity report, and they were going well beyond whatever even the feds were asking for. They were part and parcel. So this is once you start seeing that kind of cooperation, or you don't have arm's length between the businesses and the government, especially the police apparatus of the government. That's what fascism is. That's really when you start seeing that movement to use the private sector against the citizenry. That is the authoritarian nature of fascism, and that's what we saw. We certainly saw that under the Biden administration, and quite frankly, let's just admit it. The bureaucratic state is its own fiefdom, its own entity.
Fourth
over
branch.
Here.
It's a fourth branch.
Its own branch, and the federal and Congress and the legislative branch and the executive branch and even the judiciary branch have been complicit in letting it get big, and we have got to restrain it. And so, hallelujah, maybe we'll actually do some of that over the next 18 months.
Well, these banks that we're talking about that are coughing up this information unsolicited, they're giving it up. They really operate as public utilities at this point. They're no longer private companies trying to make money. They operate like a public utility, and they're dependent upon the state for all sorts of things. I remember back in 2008, Secretary Paulson called in the 9 largest banks in the country, and this was when they were stress testing them. And we have the documents for this, so I'm not guessing. I have the records here at Judicial Watch, and they're on our website. And they called in the 9 biggest banks, and they said, congratulations, you're all going to take money. And a couple of the banks said, actually, we're in good shape. We can survive your stress test. We don't need money. And Paulson told them, if you don't take money, I'm going to go outside and have a press conference, and I'm going to announce that I'm sending regulators home with you to check your bank. Now imagine what that would do to the value of a bank stock when the Secretary of the Treasury walks out and says, we just had a big meeting. These 7 said, yeah, they take money, but these 2, they're not cooperating. So we're going to send regulators home. We're going to check on them. The value of that bank would tank. So they were threatened into taking money. We have the forms that they filled out to take the money. It looks like an elementary school permission slip to go on a trip to the zoo. Literally, they hand wrote in the name of the bank, how many billions of dollars they would take, and they signed it. And we have those forms at Judicial Watch. We got them through the Freedom of Information Act. That's 2008, right? So imagine how bad it is now. And there's a documentary filmmaker that we've worked with who's doing right now a documentary on this crazy Fednapping case out in Michigan with Gretchen Whitmer. And because this person's doing a documentary that doesn't make the FBI and Justice Department look too good, as you might imagine, all of a sudden they were debanked.
Yeah.
The bank, they went in to make a deposit. They weren't even withdrawing money. They were making a deposit, and the bank said, we've frozen your account. We're going to send you a check. Yeah. And that's just because of the work they're doing.
Well, and I have friends and constituents that have had their accounts frozen. They've been debanked,
right?
Because they're conservative, and quite frankly, we need to basically dismantle completely the CFPB. That's because it's just a monster. Okay. Then the second thing is you have to. And we have multiple pieces of legislation which we have not been able to get through because it gets over in parks in the Senate. But we have got to bring these banks under heel, and because, as you say, they've actually become like public utilities.
Right.
And you can't allow a public utility for political purposes to be used as a sword or be weaponized against the out party or the other side. I mean, just like I don't condone it against conservatives, I would not condone it against liberals.
Right.
Instead, we have to deal with them the way that they should deal with us, and that is kind of a debate, kind of an open society, kind of where the marketplace of ideas determines this. You can't always get there, though. I'm afraid to say, and it's sad to say. But until we actually start taking these platforms of the banks or any one of these other institutions like the education institution, et cetera, if you just go through all of our institutions in America today, they are all co-opted by the left.
That is
correct. The left does not, they preach tolerance, but they are only tolerant if you agree with them. And we have got to make sure that we get back to this equal point of equilibrium where you have tolerance of people who disagree with you. And debanking is anything but that. But as we said, again, it gets to this whole thing with the federal government. Who trusts the federal government today? I mean, really, who trusts them? The good news for the federal government is that the media exists and the media, the left-wing media, is actually mistrusted more than the federal government. So that's the only thing that saves the federal government, gives us any kind of, credibility at all.
Yeah, and I think the great saving grace is I think more people get their basic information today off of X than they do from the legacy old, mainstream media, because everyone knows they're in the can for, whatever lefty kind of, policy or idea that's floating around out there. They know they're totally compromised. So if you want to see something for real, scroll through X. You'll have a couple of laughs because there's always something crazy in your feed, but then there's some real interviews and some real, facts and documentary evidence and video, and I mean you can look and evaluate for yourself. And there's people that hate that. I used to teach journalism law at George Mason University, and I would say, look, everyone loves the First Amendment until you disagree with them. Then all of a sudden, the First Amendment isn't too good, and they want to clamp down and shut you down. And that's what makes the old media crazy, is that X allows people to go right over their heads and right onto your phone, and you can read or not read, whatever you want, and it's not filtered and homogenized for your protection,
Well, and that's, Chris, that's really what Donald Trump did in 2016.
Right.
He went outside the mainstream media and just spoke to people and used social media. And this time he actually used it even more effectively.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, people in the demographic, even now, of 55 to 65, 70, they still like newspapers, but not very much. Yeah. They don't trust them. They like them for the coupons and the ads that come in. And so the bottom line is you're seeing a total realignment culturally and politically.
Right.
And it's all based on this notion of social media and what's happening there. I mean, look, I get a million newspapers that come to my office. I don't know why we subscribe to them, but they do. They come to my office. I don't ever look at them.
Of course not.
I go to the news aggregators. I go through probably 10 or 11 news aggregators first thing every morning when I get to the office, see what's brewing all over the place. And that's just scratching the surface of where you can go to find information.
Sure.
And it allows everybody to determine the credibility. And you know what the next step is the state governments and the federal governments are coming in. And this is a problem with a bill that was being considered last week. They were going to allow blue state basically attorneys general to have even more power and authority than they do now. They want to give power to suppress and censor you if you're not, I don't know, means if you're not on CBS, NBC, or ABC or something like that. I guess the bottom line is that's the next frontier for them, is they have to try to get us to censor us. And they've done it, from time to time, they've done a decent job. We've seen that.
Yeah. Yep.
I do think the cat is out of the bag on that. I don't think you can ever put that genie, mixing my metaphors all over the place, I don't think you can put that genie back into the lamp at this point, because too many people rely on it. I mean, there would be rebellion. I mean, look at TikTok. We don't trust TikTok. Chinese are using TikTok to spy on us,
right?
And we can't get anybody to. TikTok's proliferating.
I mean,
it's out there.
The breadth and scope of new media, which isn't really that new, but relatively speaking, new media it's outpacing itself, and there'll be more. Hopefully, from my point of view, the more the merrier. I don't want to restrict speech. I want everybody to say whatever they want to, and the American public's pretty sharp. They perceive what's for real and what's a rigged game. The best evidence of that is the supposed convicted felon who's returning to the White House in about a month. The American public saw through that in 2 seconds and knew it was all a big lie. And somehow the 78-year-old who's using social media knows exactly how to jump over their heads, talk to real Americans, and get them motivated,
Yeah, think about this. So I saw an article about Stephen A. Smith, who's a commentator on ESPN.
Sure.
And he is so aggravated at the Democrat Party because he says every time we turn around, we find out that they're lying to us.
Right.
And, well, big surprise. So they lied to them about on the crime stats, right? So we catch them in the big lie on the crime stats.
Right.
Then we catch the federal government in a lie on the J6 guys. Oh, hey, they would never come clean. And if somebody like me said, well, there is some weird stuff going on here that might indicate maybe there was some human intelligence personnel there on behalf of the FBI. Andy, you are just the craziest
conspiracy theorist. That's right.
Yeah, and it turns out there were 26 of them.
Exactly. And that's the ones they'll admit to. It's even
That's
more
the ones
than that.
they'll admit to.
Right.
That they're only admitted to those because we could track those guys.
Correct.
We find them out.
Hey,
So,
listen, when it comes to conspiracy theories, I've only got a couple of minutes left with you. So I want to touch on something that everybody's talking about. It's not getting enough media coverage. But I was talking to a New Jersey mayor just a short while ago about the drones. I'm using air quotes when I say drones. The mayor told me something fascinating. The New Jersey State Police have announced or said or admitted that the one and only day in the last month where there were no drone sightings was Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, well.
Congressman, what does that tell you? What does that tell you about the drones?
They're all American folks. That's what it tells you. They're great people celebrating Thanksgiving like that. Well, look, here's my deal. I don't know who's doing the drones, but I can tell you this: if that was happening in Middle America, or maybe even in my home district in Arizona, you start flying a bunch of drones over consistently like that, and they're flying about 200 feet. It's coming down with a shot. I'm just telling you. Somebody's going to bring that thing down, and then we'll all get to walk over and see, hey, what is that thing?
Yeah.
And maybe that's what should happen. But here's the comfort I hope that your listeners can take here, and I'm saying this tongue in cheek, is that Alejandro Mayorkas, the failed director of Homeland Security, the impeached director of Homeland Security,
Yep.
has said, don't worry. These are not foreign drones. Everything's okay. There's nothing to see here, nothing to worry about. Kind of like those 7 million people that he's given parole to in America that have illegally come across this closed border that he says is so closed. So, I mean, that it just adds to the whole mystique of your federal government that you can't trust.
Exactly. Somebody's doing something. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's an exercise or it's real or. I don't think it's too terribly dangerous because if you're taking off for Thanksgiving turkey, it can't be that urgent. But
everybody needs a break for Thanksgiving. There's no doubt about that.
Right. Listen, Congressman Andy Biggs, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. I'll give you the very last word as we close out here.
Well, Chris, thanks for having me. Thanks for all that Judicial Watch does. You guys have really been great leaders in the fight against the weaponized state, and I appreciate all that you do to get transparency. And I wish you and all of your viewers a very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and we'll see you soon again, I hope.
Thank you very much, Congressman Biggs. That's great.
Thank you.
I'm Chris Farrell on Watch.